Hey guys, so today we'll be continuing on this story, so here we go. FDR, Franklin Delano. We're continuing on this story called, what was the Great Depression? So, so here we go. Franklin Delano Roosevelt, or FDR for short. So here we go. FDR, Franklin Delano Roosevelt was an unlikely person to become the protector of the poor. He was born in 1882 into a wealthy upper-class family. President Theodore Roosevelt was his fifth cousin. In 1921, he became ill with polio, and his legs were paralyzed. He never walked more than a few steps again, and only with heavy metal braces. As much as possible, he kept this hidden. He was president. As much as possible, he kept this hidden. He was president for over 12 years, yet he never let himself be seen in a public wheelchair. Chapter 7. Big Changes. When Roosevelt took office on March 4th, 1933, he told the nation there were going to be big changes. The government would do whatever was needed to fix the nation. He was willing to experiment. He brought with him a group of advisors nicknamed the Brain Trust. Farewell 18th Amendment. They came up with all sorts of new ideas. The group included Frances Perkins, his Secretary of Labor. She was the first woman ever appointed to a U.S. cabinet post. One of Roosevelt's very first acts was to keep a promise from the campaign. He repealed prohibition. This didn't end the Depression, but it helped cheer people up. It also proved that FDR meant to keep his promises. In the first 100 days of Roosevelt's presidency, the nation's mood turned around. In less than 4 months, Congress passed 15 major bills. This speed was unheard of. Usually there were weeks of arguments before a bill was voted on. A popular comedian, Will Rogers remarked, Congress doesn't pass legislation anymore. They just wave at the bills as they go by. Roosevelt concentrated on what he called the 3R: relief, recovery, and reform. Relief meant help. It came first. People who were starving or about to lose their homes didn't have time to wait for long-term changes to take effect. People who were starving or about to lose their homes didn't have time to wait for long-term changes to take effect. Okay, here we go again. People who were starving or about to lose their homes didn't have time to wait for long-term changes to take effect. Something had to be done right away. People don't eat in the long run. People don't eat in the long run. A member of a brain trust pointed out, they eat every day. So many of Roosevelt's projects were known by their initials, such as IP, that they are called the alphabet agencies. 3 of the first relief plans were FERA, the Federal Emergency Relief Agency, CWA, the Civil Works Administration, and CCC, the Civilian Conservation Corps. Farah gave money to people who needed it. Looks similar than a girl's name, Farah. Farah gave money to people who needed it. It also offered job training. And tried to create new jobs. By 1935, Farah had helped more than 20 million workers. Farah also tried to make use of the corpses that were rotting on the farms. It came up with ways to get food to starving people, and it set up the first national system of school lunches. The CWA created short-term jobs for more than 4 million workers. These workers built and repaired public structures such as roads, schools, parks, bridges, and outhouses. The CCC was aimed at young and unemployed men like the hobos. The men went to live in camps in the national forests and parks. They planted trees, fought forest fires, and built campgrounds. In the evenings, many earned high school diplomas. One of Roosevelt's first acts was to close down all the banks. Then he reopened only the stable ones. This gave consumers faith in the banks. They started using them again. In his first speech as president, Roosevelt told the American people, "The only thing we have to fear is fear itself." Now he was making them believe it. Didn't you see? Yeah. Eleanor Roosevelt was a very unusual first lady. She helped her husband with the work of running the country. In the past, first ladies had usually stayed in the background, but Eleanor made speeches pushing her husband's ideas. She worked for her women's rights, and she also worked for her women's rights and racial equality. She had her own popular newspaper column called My Day. She received as many as 300,000 letters a year from Americans who looked. She received as many as 300,000 letters a year from Americans who looked on her as a friend. She received as many as 300,000 letters a year from Americans who looked on her as a friend. Many were from children. Many were from children. They asked for a bicycle, a typewriter, money for the doctor, or decent clothing so that they could go to school. Eleanor couldn't answer all these letters personally, but she tried to set up programs that would provide for children and help them stay in school. That's right, I agree. So yeah. The second R stood for recovery. This referred to laws meant to jumpstart the economy. The most important of these created the NRA, short for National Recovery Administration. That's right, like a girl's name, NRA. It encouraged businesses to agree on a minimum wage. It encouraged businesses to agree on a minimum wage, a limit on working hours, and an end to child labor. Only businesses that joined the NRA could display the NRA Eagle. Love eagles though. Most businesses wanted to show they were cooperating. This was one of the first times the American government ever tried to control the relationship between workers and employers. Yeah. The AAA, short for BAAA, short for Agricultural Adjustment Act. Agricultural Adjustment Act. I said it. Paid farmers to limit how much food they produced so it wouldn't go to waste. VHOLC, short for Homeowners Loan Corporation. VHOLC, short for Homeowners Loan Corporation, helped keep people from losing their homes. The TVA, Tennessee Valley Authority, built dams on the Tennessee River, bringing electricity and irrigation to an area which had lacked them. It still exists today. This is really hard work. But don't worry, I'll be on it as soon as we can. So, the last but not least is this. Roosevelt's final R stood for reform. These were acts meant to make sure a Great Depression could never happen again. He tried to control the kind of risks banks were allowed to take, and he made sure that the stock market gave investors complete information. The controls that Roosevelt put in place lasted until 1999. Then Congress ended many of them. Some economists think this may have helped cause the financial crisis that shook the United States in 2008, which WALL-E had released, because that's my favorite movie, WALL-E. So the sweeping changes Roosevelt made in his first 100 days were called the New Deal. Almost immediately, they produced a surge of hope. Roosevelt started giving informal fireside chats on the radio. Many Americans thought of him as a friend who really cared about them. Since so many people trusted Roosevelt, they started to have faith in the economy again. They were no longer afraid to hire workers or to spend money. Unemployment started to go down. But after the excitement of the first 100 days, things did not always run smoothly. But after the excitement of the first 100 days, things did not always run smoothly. The growth of labor movement. The American labor movement came of age during the Great Depression. Critics said the movement was being run by communists. Some people even accused President Roosevelt of being one. In 1917, a communist revolution had overthrown the government of Russia. The Russians claimed that they were putting all the power of government in the hands of the workers. Some people in the American labor movement were inspired by the communists' ideas, but many were only interested in helping workers who were paid wages too low to live on. During the Depression, workers banded together in labor unions, not the onions you ate, to give them more bargaining power. During the Depression, workers banded together into labor unions to give them more bargaining power with their employers. Many strikes took place. This means that the workers had refused to do all of their jobs or to let anyone else do them. If all the workers agreed to strike, they could shut down a factory until their demands were met. Roosevelt angered rich businessmen by supporting the union. If I went to work in a factory, the first thing I'd do is to join a union. If I went to work in a factory, the first thing I'd do is join a union, he said. Strike for wage, 100% of union. 100% union. 100%. Okay. Chapter 8. The Dust Bowl. I said it. So, even as hope started to grow, a new crisis was beginning. But time could not have been worse. Since 1930 it had been barely rained in the central part of country. Farms there were trouble in farms there were in trouble. Crops died in the fields. Farm animals that couldn't find enough grass to eat starved. Then came something even worse. During the boom of the 20s, farmers in the Great Plains had plowed up the grasses to plant crops. This left bare soil. Bare soil? Now the fields were standing empty, with no roots to hold the dry dirt down. It blew away in huge dust storms. Day turned into night. People could barely breathe even indoors. Cars, houses, and entire farms were buried under huge drifts of sand. After a dust storm, farmland looked as dry as farmland looked as dry and barren as the moon. I believe we'll stop here because I can continue this tomorrow. But anyways, good night. Bye.